There is something strange happening in your connection with this person. And if you've been feeling confused, receiving mixed signals, or wondering why someone who clearly shows signs of affection still seems hesitant, distant, or inconsistent, then what you are about to hear may explain everything. Because this is not a story about someone who doesn't care. This is not a story about someone who has forgotten you. And this is definitely not a story about someone who has moved on. No. This is a story about someone who loves you far more deeply than you realize. But there is one issue they have never fully confronted. One issue they have hidden behind smiles, excuses, and silence. An issue connected to your appearance. Before you jump to conclusions, listen carefully. Because the truth is much more complicated than most people imagine. And by the end of this message, you may see this entire situation from a completely different perspective. What this person feels for you is real. The late-night thoughts. The memories. The curiosity. The emotional attachment. The feeling they get when your name appears unexpectedly. All of that is genuine. But despite these feelings, something inside them creates resistance. Every time they start moving closer, that resistance pulls them back. Every time they imagine a future, that resistance whispers doubts into their mind. And the shocking part? The resistance isn't always about physical attraction itself. Sometimes it is about fear. Sometimes it is about insecurity. Sometimes it is about social pressure. And sometimes it is about something they are deeply ashamed to admit. Because while the world loves to pretend that love is simple, human beings are complicated. This person has built an image in their mind of what their future partner should look like. An image influenced by family, friends, social media, movies, old expectations, past experiences. For years they carried that image without questioning it. Then you entered their life. And suddenly everything became confusing. Because emotionally, you matched things they never expected. You understood them. You challenged them. You connected with them. You reached parts of their heart that nobody else could reach. Yet at the same time, you didn't completely fit the picture they had imagined. And that contradiction created an internal battle. A battle they never anticipated. A battle they still haven't fully resolved. Have you noticed how sometimes this person becomes incredibly warm? Almost as if they are ready to give their entire heart. Then suddenly they pull away. Suddenly they become distant. Suddenly they act uncertain. It feels confusing because their actions seem to contradict each other. But inside their mind, two voices are fighting. One voice says, "This person is special." The other voice says, "But what will people think?" One voice says, "I feel happy around them." The other says, "Is this really what I imagined for my life?" One voice says, "I don't want to lose them." The other says, "What if I regret this later?" And every time those voices collide, confusion follows. What makes this even more surprising is that they know how unfair this sounds. Deep down they know. Deep down they understand that appearance changes. Deep down they know that character matters more. Deep down they recognize your value. That is why this situation torments them. Because they don't want to be the kind of person who judges someone based on appearance. Yet part of them continues doing exactly that. And this creates guilt. A tremendous amount of guilt. The guilt becomes so strong that sometimes they avoid thinking about it altogether. Sometimes they distract themselves. Sometimes they focus on work. Sometimes they disappear emotionally. Not because they don't care, but because facing their own contradictions feels uncomfortable. Now here comes the revelation that changes everything. The issue they have with your appearance may not even be the thing you think it is. Many people automatically assume appearance means beauty. But often it means something entirely different. Perhaps it is your style, your confidence, your uniqueness, your refusal to fit into certain expectations, your authenticity, your presence. Because some people become uncomfortable when they meet someone who refuses to wear a mask. And you may be far more authentic than anyone they have ever known. That authenticity attracts them. But it also scares them. Because authenticity forces people to confront themselves. And not everyone is ready for that. There are moments when this person looks at you and sees something extraordinary. Not perfection. Not flawlessness. Something much more powerful. They see someone real. Someone genuine. Someone who isn't constantly performing for approval. Someone who possesses a kind of freedom they secretly wish they had. And that realization creates admiration. But it also creates insecurity. Because every strength you possess shines a light on something unresolved inside them. The truth is, this person's biggest struggle may not actually be your appearance. Their biggest struggle may be their own self-image. People who are secure rarely obsess over how others appear. People who truly know themselves rarely allow outside opinions to control their choices. But this person has spent years worrying about judgment. Years worrying about acceptance. Years worrying about fitting in. Years worrying about what others might say. And now those fears are interfering with their feelings. Imagine how exhausting that must be. Imagine loving someone. Thinking about them constantly. Missing them when they're gone. Feeling drawn toward them. Yet simultaneously questioning whether they match some unrealistic standard. That conflict is draining. And lately, it has become harder for them to ignore. Because no matter how much they try to focus on appearances, their emotions keep bringing them back to you. Your conversations. Your energy. Your presence. Your impact. The way you make them feel. Those things refuse to disappear. And that is where the story becomes truly interesting. Because the more they fight these feelings, the stronger the feelings become. The more they try to focus on superficial concerns, the more they realize those concerns don't satisfy them. The more they compare you to others, the more they notice that nobody affects them the way you do. That realization is beginning to crack the walls they built around themselves. Slowly. Gradually. But undeniably. There have already been moments when they caught themselves imagining a future with you. Moments they never planned. Moments that arrived unexpectedly. A random thought. a random dream, a random memory. And suddenly they found themselves picturing a life together. Then panic appeared. Then doubt appeared. Then the old fears returned. But the image remained. Because once a person begins imagining a future with someone, it becomes difficult to erase. And that is exactly what is happening. What they feel continues growing. Even while they resist it. Even while they question it. Even while they analyze it. The heart keeps moving forward. The mind keeps pulling backward. And the tension between those two forces is reaching a breaking point. Sooner or later, they will have to make a decision. Not about you. About themselves. Because this situation is forcing them to confront an important question. Will they continue living according to fear? Or will they start living according to truth? Will they choose appearances? Or connection? Will they choose approval? Or authenticity? Will they choose comfort? Or real love? That decision is approaching faster than they realize. And when it arrives, everything changes. Because no matter what happens next, one thing has already become clear. You have affected this person far more deeply than they ever intended. Far more deeply than they ever expected. Far more deeply than they are willing to admit. And the longer they try to hide from that reality, the more impossible it becomes to ignore. The story isn't over. In many ways, it is only beginning. Because the secret battle inside their heart is reaching a turning point. A moment where masks fall. Excuses disappear. And the truth finally reveals itself. When that moment comes, the answer they have been avoiding for so long will stand directly in front of them. And for the first time, they will have to decide whether appearance matters more than the connection they cannot stop feeling. But the story goes even deeper than that. Because what this person has never told you is that their struggle didn't begin when they met you. It started years before you ever crossed their path. Long before your first conversation. Long before they learned your name. Long before they felt anything for you. You see, people don't suddenly develop fears overnight. The beliefs that control them today were built slowly. One experience at a time. One disappointment at a time. One judgment at a time. And this person grew up in an environment where appearances carried enormous weight. Whether it came from family expectations, friends' opinions, past relationships, or society's endless obsession with image. They learned very early that appearance could determine acceptance. They learned that appearance could influence status. They learned that appearance could affect how others treated them. And over time, those lessons became deeply rooted. So deeply rooted that they stopped questioning them. Until you appeared. And suddenly everything they thought they understood became complicated. Because you challenged their beliefs without even trying. You challenged them simply by being yourself. And that is why they cannot easily walk away. If this were only about attraction, they would have left already. If this were only about appearances, they would have moved on already. If this were only about logic, the story would already be over. But it isn't. Because every time they attempt to create distance, something unexpected happens. A memory appears. A conversation returns to their mind. A feeling resurfaces. A reminder of you emerges from nowhere. And once again they find themselves thinking about someone they supposedly should have forgotten. That is what frustrates them. That is what confuses them. That is what keeps them awake some nights. Because they have tried to explain you away. They have tried to categorize you. They have tried to convince themselves that their feelings aren't as serious as they seem. Yet every attempt has failed. And failure after failure is beginning to teach them something important. The heart does not always follow the rules the mind creates. In fact, the strongest connections often appear where people least expect them. Have you ever wondered why this person pays attention to small details about you? Details most people would overlook? The way you laugh. The way you react when you're excited. The way you talk about things that matter to you. The way your eyes change when you're passionate about something. The way your energy fills a room. These are not things people notice when they feel indifferent. These are not things people remember when they don't care. These are the details people remember when someone has become important. And whether they admit it or not, you have become important. More important than they planned. More important than they expected. More important than they feel comfortable acknowledging. But there is another secret. A much deeper secret. Sometimes when this person thinks about your appearance, they compare it to how they initially saw you. And what surprises them is that their perception keeps changing. Features they barely noticed before now stand out. Qualities they once overlooked now attract them. Things they once questioned now seem meaningful. Why? Because emotional connection changes perception. The closer people feel emotionally, the more beautiful they often see each other. Science has observed this. Life has proven it countless times. And this person is experiencing it firsthand. That is one of the reasons they feel so conflicted. Because the image they once held in their mind is evolving. Changing. Transforming. And they are struggling to understand why. Sometimes they catch themselves looking at your pictures longer than intended. Sometimes they revisit old conversations. Sometimes they replay memories. Sometimes they smile unexpectedly while thinking about you. Then they stop themselves. Then they become self-conscious. Then they remind themselves of the doubts they once had. But those doubts don't feel as powerful as they used to. And that frightens them. Because if those doubts disappear completely, they will no longer have an excuse. No longer have a shield. No longer have a reason to keep their distance. The truth is that this person's biggest fear isn't actually loving you. Their biggest fear is what happens after they fully surrender to those feelings. Because love requires vulnerability. Love requires courage. Love requires choosing another human being despite uncertainty. And they are terrified of making the wrong choice. Not because of you. Because of their own history. Because they have been disappointed before. Because they have trusted before. Because they have believed before. And sometimes those experiences ended painfully. So now they analyze everything. Overthink everything. Question everything. Even their own emotions. Especially their own emotions. That overthinking has become a prison. a prison invisible to everyone except them. And every day they remain trapped inside it, the pressure grows. Because feelings ignored do not disappear. They accumulate. They intensify. They wait. And eventually they demand attention. Something else is happening too. Something they would never openly admit. There are moments when they imagine losing you forever. Moments when they imagine you finding someone else. Moments when they imagine you moving on completely. And those thoughts create a reaction they cannot explain. Jealousy. Fear. Regret. Panic. Suddenly all the concerns about appearance become less important. Suddenly all the doubts become quieter. Suddenly the possibility of losing you feels much larger than the concerns they once obsessed over. That realization has shocked them more than anyone knows. Because it revealed what truly matters to them. Not the opinions of others. Not unrealistic expectations. Not imagined standards. You. The possibility of losing your presence. The possibility of losing your energy. The possibility of losing the connection that continues pulling them back. That realization has planted a seed. A seed that grows every time they think about you. Every time they remember you. Every time they wonder what you're doing. Every time they imagine life without you. And seeds eventually become something larger. Something impossible to ignore. Right now, this person stands at a crossroads. One path leads back to old patterns. Old fears. Old beliefs. Old limitations. The other path leads toward honesty. Toward growth. Toward confronting uncomfortable truths. Toward accepting feelings they have spent so long resisting. They haven't fully chosen yet. But something inside them is changing. You can feel it. They can feel it. Even if nobody says it aloud. The walls are not as strong as they once were. The excuses are not as convincing as they once were. The resistance is not as powerful as it once was. And every passing day brings them closer to a realization they cannot avoid. The realization that genuine connection is rare. Much rarer than appearance. Much rarer than attraction. Much rarer than superficial perfection. Real connection cannot be manufactured. It cannot be forced. It cannot be replaced easily. And deep inside, they know what they have found in you. That knowledge is becoming impossible to suppress. Soon, they will have to face it completely. Soon, they will have to stop hiding behind confusion. Soon, they will have to decide whether fear deserves control over their future. Because the heart can tolerate uncertainty for only so long. Eventually it demands truth. And when that truth finally emerges, the choice standing before them may be far more obvious than they ever imagined. For now, they continue watching. Thinking. Wondering. Questioning. Feeling. But beneath all of those emotions lies one undeniable fact. No matter how hard they try to focus on appearances, their heart keeps finding its way back to you. And that is a reality becoming harder and harder for them to escape. And now we arrive at the part of this story that almost nobody sees. The hidden chapter. The chapter taking place behind closed doors. The chapter this person would never openly discuss. Because while they have been struggling with their thoughts about your appearance, something else has been happening at the exact same time. They have been comparing everyone else to you. Not intentionally. Not consciously. But it keeps happening. They meet new people. And somehow they end up thinking about you. They have conversations with others. And somehow they remember your words. They try distracting themselves. Yet your presence remains in the background of their mind. At first, they didn't notice it. Then they started noticing. And once they noticed, they couldn't stop noticing. Because every comparison led them back to the same uncomfortable conclusion. The qualities they truly value aren't the qualities they once thought they valued. This realization has shaken them. For years they believed they knew exactly what they wanted. Exactly what mattered. Exactly what kind of person would make them happy. Then reality challenged their assumptions. And reality won. That is what makes this situation so powerful. You didn't change their mind through arguments. You didn't convince them through persuasion. You didn't force anything. Your existence alone challenged beliefs they carried for years. And deep down, they know it. There have been moments when this person stared at their own reflection and asked themselves difficult questions. Questions they never expected to ask. Questions that made them uncomfortable. Questions like, why am I fighting this? Why can't I stop thinking about them? Why do they matter so much? Why am I creating problems where there may not actually be any? Those questions have no easy answers. And the harder they search for answers, the more complicated everything becomes. Because every road leads back to the same truth. The truth they have spent so much energy avoiding. The truth that scares them. The truth that excites them. The truth that changes everything. They love far more about you than they dislike. Far more. In fact, the imbalance has become impossible to ignore. What once seemed like a major concern has gradually become smaller. Meanwhile, everything they admire about you has continued growing. Your personality. Your resilience. Your kindness. Your uniqueness. Your strength. Your ability to remain yourself. These qualities have gained power over time. And that power is beginning to outweigh every doubt they once had. But there is something even more shocking. The thing they originally saw as a flaw may eventually become one of the reasons they fall even deeper. Because human beings often become attached to the very things that make someone different. The unique smile. The unusual feature. The imperfect detail. The characteristic nobody else possesses. These things create identity. They create memorability. They create emotional attachment. And slowly, almost without realizing it, this person has started associating those unique qualities with you. When they think about you, they don't think about perfection. They think about you. And there is a difference. A massive difference. Because perfection is replaceable. Identity is not. Perfection is common. Authenticity is rare. And authentic people leave marks on the heart that cannot easily be erased. That is exactly what has happened here. You have left a mark. A deep one. One that continues growing stronger despite their resistance. One that remains present despite their doubts. One that keeps appearing no matter how many distractions they create. There is another truth they haven't admitted. Sometimes they wonder whether they deserve you. Not whether you deserve them. Whether they deserve you. Because as their feelings have grown, so has their awareness of your value. They see things now that they missed before. They recognize qualities they once overlooked. They notice strengths they once underestimated. And occasionally that realization creates insecurity. Because genuine love doesn't just reveal the other person. It reveals ourselves. It exposes fears, weaknesses, contradictions, unresolved wounds. And this person has been confronting all of those things. That is why their behavior may have seemed inconsistent. Because while you thought they were trying to understand you, they were actually trying to understand themselves. Trying to understand why you matter. Trying to understand why their emotions refuse to cooperate with their old beliefs. Trying to understand why your absence affects them. Trying to understand why your presence feels significant. The answers are becoming clearer now. Painfully clear. And clarity changes everything. Because confusion allows delay. Confusion allows excuses. Confusion allows avoidance. Clarity does not. Once people see the truth, they must respond to it. Sooner or later. And the truth standing in front of this person is impossible to ignore. They care. Deeply. More deeply than they intended. More deeply than they planned. More deeply than they can comfortably manage. That emotional reality has become stronger than the concerns they once placed so much importance on. Does that mean every fear has disappeared? No. Does that mean every doubt has vanished? No. Human beings are rarely that simple. But the balance has shifted. The scales have moved. And what once dominated their thoughts no longer carries the same power. Because feelings have been gaining ground. Day after day. Memory after memory. Moment after moment. Now something important is approaching. A moment of honesty. A moment where they can no longer hide behind uncertainty. A moment where they must choose whether fear continues controlling their life. Or whether they finally trust what their heart has been telling them all along. When that moment arrives, they may surprise even themselves. Because growth often happens quietly. Change often happens gradually. Until one day people wake up and realize they are no longer who they used to be. That transformation may already be happening. Slowly. Silently. Powerfully. And if it continues, the person standing before you in the future may be very different from the one struggling today. More honest. More self-aware. More courageous. More willing to embrace what truly matters. Because beneath all the confusion, beneath all the hesitation, beneath all the overthinking, there is one truth that refuses to disappear. You became important to them. Not because you matched a fantasy. Not because you fit a perfect image. Not because you fulfilled every expectation. You became important because you touched something real inside them. Something authentic. Something unforgettable. And the deepest irony of all? The thing they once believed would prevent them from loving you completely may be the very thing that taught them what real love actually is. A love that sees beyond appearances. A love that sees beyond expectations. A love that sees beyond fear. A love that finally recognizes what has been standing in front of it all along. And that realization may be closer than either of you think.